Go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Geraldine Davis, and I'm happy to have you here for our session today. Today, we are concentrating on creating an inclusive culture at your organization and where to start. 6 months ago, SIA decided to embark on a 6-month training focusing on inclusion. And the participants of that inclusion training involved the executive committee, which I have here with me today. So I have Wendy Carey with Sirius, as well as Eric Tung with FARA, who's the president of FARA, as well as Chris Licata, who is the president and CEO of Technical Group North America, and Dino Dardano, the president of Hestra, as well as Wendy being the CFO and VP. So we are so excited to have you here because we wanted to convey a very authentic, holistic perspective to creating inclusion. And ideally, we wanted to create a perspective where everyone sees that inclusion is a journey and that there are varied perspectives that entail this inclusive journey. So we want to start with understanding what made you decide to embark on your inclusion journey. And I want to start with you, Wendy.
Oh boy. So, as we're all so aware of the events of 2020 and COVID, I think really facilitated the beginnings of this in that it really shut us down. It stopped us in our tracks, and it gave us time to, it forced us to question a lot of our space and our environment. And then George Floyd happened, which was nothing really new, but in this space where we had all stopped and were asking ourselves and our environment what's going on, it really brought the opportunity for us, I think, to face in a way that we hadn't faced before where we were and what was happening in our planet, in our countries, in the US, in our industry, and in ourselves. Mm-hmm. And in this space, when I think about it, what is the best resource that we have for change? And it really is human resources. Mm-hmm. And that is the connections that we all have. And it seems to me like the connections that have been broken with ourselves and with each other is what have caused all these different issues to arise, including environmental impacts. And so when this opportunity and this focus on inclusion and how we were leaving people out of the conversation, how we were not recognizing the dignity and equality of each other, and how we weren't really coming from a heart space first about things, inclusion seemed like just the logical, perfect way to go to begin to address issues that could solve this. So I'm grateful to be part of this journey and learning more about how I individually respond to things, and then being able to spread it out in our company and beyond.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that you mentioned this idea of learning and how it really just has allowed us to challenge our frame of thought and really concentrate on like, how am I viewing the world and how am I engaging with the world? I know, Eric, you've been really diligent in your efforts as far as like really just expanding your own frame of thought. Can you kind of talk through what that experience has been like for you?
Well, sure. I'm thrilled to be part of this execcom process of inclusion. And as Wendy kind of touched on, it's really been a period of reflection, I think, for everybody on a number of topics. But inclusion in particular, led me to reflect on my own experience, as a member of more than one kind of minority group. It had me go back and think, like, what was that like? What was my own experience, my own journey, overcoming certain biases or certain preconceived notions? What is it like to be the other in a given conversation or industry or topic? And so it's been a great opportunity to reflect on that experience. It's been a great opportunity to reflect on the experience of our company and our brand. My mother founded our business as a minority immigrant female in a very male-dominated industry. And it's something that I didn't really fully grasp until we kind of went through this experience. And it's led to some great conversations. What was her experience like? Feeling like a relative outsider in the industry, And, I think it still translates. I mean, it's not always intentional, but sometimes we just kind of go about our day and go about our motions, and momentum leads us down a path where we're like, wait, we kind of like left some people out here, or we might not be incorporating people, points of view, thoughts that maybe we should. And so what's been great about this experience, beyond kind of reflecting, is just realizing that, I think so many of us are really in the right headspace for opening up, and for rethinking how things are done. As Wendy mentioned, COVID has been a real game changer for everybody, and forced us out of kind of old frameworks. But the great experience that we've had here on ExecCom, in this process, is just seeing that as soon as you open the door to the conversation and you're willing to kind of expose yourself and let people in, and let yourself be seen, there's a tremendous amount of support. There are tremendous opportunities, and plenty of resources. So it's been a really positive experience for me, and I think for the whole group here. And I'm looking forward to our continued work to make inclusion a more integral part of our industry and our business.
Yeah. I think it's phenomenal that you mentioned this idea of making it an integral part of your business. And I know, Chris, you've been very intentional about ensuring that Technica Group has embedded in its strategy, its marketing, as well as operations and its financials. What has been your experience with creating that type of impact?
Well, thanks for the question. I think it first started by what Wendy mentioned in the spring following the murder of George Floyd, and it certainly wasn't the first of its kind, but it was extraordinary in a way that enraged a nation. It really tipped the scale, and it forced all of us as people, and certainly as organizations, to consider where we stand on the issue of not only racial justice, but justice for all marginalized people. And before we started putting in place any plans to create change within our organization, the challenge for me, quite honestly, was to find my voice on the topic. I certainly knew where I stood, but whether it was making a statement at home to my kids, or whether it was making a statement to our company, or on behalf of SIA, trying to make a statement to the industry, before anything happened, I needed to get comfortable with being uncomfortable around this topic. And I took a bit of time. It was about a week after everybody was issuing statements of proclamation about how they were planning on addressing the racial injustice in our country. The first step, to answer your question, was I did find my voice, and I made an unequivocal, in print and in presentation, an unequivocal statement that our company won't tolerate racism or bigotry in any form, and sort of posed this question to the company of, what really our role is in creating, supporting, and sustaining change. And it was sort of this challenge for us. And so following the statement that I made, I also communicated that I was planning on starting within our company a working group to really start to understand this topic more deeply, with complete vulnerability and humility, that I did not know. This was really in earnest my first step, but I was committed to making progress and being a part of the change. And I opened the topic up to the company, whether you shared my views or not, to start to do this work. And I was quickly met with so much enthusiasm by people that approached me after the presentation, or emailed me right after, saying, this is so important to me, I want to be a part of it. And so we created a working group that is affectionately referred to as the most favorite meeting of the week. We meet on a weekly basis. But what we were able to do is establish a regular meeting rhythm. But one of the first things we did, and this is going back to July and August, is we created a working group charter, what we were trying to do. And that took a month or two to really work through. We call ourselves the IDEA team, which is Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Action, because we want it to be focused on action. But we created a charter We also created a DEI statement that we communicated to our company and to anybody that interacts with our company, so they know quite clearly whether they're an athlete that represents us or a rep or a subcontractor of some form, where we stand on it. We have engaged throughout the duration of 2021 outside professional inclusion training for all of our company, knowing full well that, again, not everybody shares my view, and that's important to include those. And then we're doing some tactical things, reviewing our holiday schedule. For example, Martin Luther King Day wasn't on our national holiday schedule. It now is. We changed Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. We added 2 floating holidays and are building a framework for people being out of the office focused around inclusion within our community, as an example, and a whole host of other things. And the one thing that I would say is, throughout this process, it sounds like we've done a lot, and I'm proud of the work that we've done. But man, it is a messy business, and it's part of the thing it's never done, and it's uncomfortable, but it's so gratifying and energizing, the work. And so yeah, it's been incredibly exciting and humbling.
That's amazing. I think what I found most profound with your statement and with some of the experience that you've had is that it isn't never done. I mean, I think even people have come to me and was like, well, what do we need to do and when is it done? I'm like, I've been doing this for 16 years and it's still not done. And I'm still working through it. And I'm still finding ways to include people and ensure that people feel like they're respected and there's a mutual belonging. And that's really the heart of inclusion, is ensuring that voice is there. But it's never done. But I think that's the fun part. I don't actually want it to be done. Like, it's exhilarating and it's challenging and character building, as I like to call it, but it's well worth it. So that's amazing that you had that perspective. And I think what you were very intentional about is conveying that you started with where you were. And Dino, I love your story as well, because you're very organic in where you are in your inclusion journey. Can you kind of share what it means to start where you are and kind of share your experience?
Yeah, with Wendy and Chris's encouragement and inspiration, we've decided to implement a similar program starting in March within our company. And, as I've thought through the process about how this is going to come together, I really think you got to look fundamentally at the structure of your company and the different departments and how they're integrated and how they're inclusive. And we got some work to do there. I guess the most encouraging thing for me personally was sharing my thoughts of putting this committee together with my management team and how open and receptive they were to, similar to Chris's team there. So we're anxious to get started. Obviously, we got a lot of heavy lifting to do with the sell-in season yet, but I'm happy to be heading down an inclusive path for our company, not only for the immediate future, but long-term, and putting some policies in place that will support inclusion in our hiring practices and other aspects of our company. Chris mentioned vendors, right? I think it is important for a company to have a statement in what we believe in and who we want to do business with. So I'm looking forward to the challenge and happy to be a part of the team.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think that even what you're talking about is that short-term goals as well as long-term. So creating this intricate process, where it projects and feeds into the remainder of your success of your organization, I think is really profound. And you even mentioned talking about the inclusive culture and how even some of your departments aren't, connected to each other. And how can we create that type of inclusive culture to prepare for that is amazing. That's fantastic. And Wendy, I know you've mentioned a lot about just Cirrus's efforts to, being somewhat of a diverse company already. What has been some of the efforts that you've taken as far as, being able to create more inclusivity in your organization from where you are?
Yeah, you're right. There's some obvious diversity. If you look at Mike Carey, one of our founding partners, and a few other faces that are often associated with our company, but behind the scenes, we have just as much, if not more, diversity. And we have quite a huge Filipino population as part of our staff, as well as Laotian and Southeast Asian that came over after the Vietnam conflict or during the Vietnam conflict and Middle Eastern. But anyway, it's as we kind of looked at this, we thought more purposefully about how we are engaging the various voices. And we're fortunate in having a very heartfelt, dedicated team. But it was in creating a methodology of really understanding that this was at the heart of our principles, and understanding that within and without too, because we haven't really talked publicly about who we are. We just were. And with this, I think, came the indication that there is something that we can offer just in terms of our own journey and how we approach that. So we have embarked upon a purpose mission, and that mission has become a very inclusive arena for our company, in that the people who are on the central committee of that, we asked for volunteers, much similar to what Chris did in their company. And we got people from all different levels and positions within the company. And well, I think there might be one or two department managers who are on it, but everybody else is just, somebody in the company who said, ooh, yeah, I want to be there. And then hearing the input and hearing their development of an articulation and a communication about what Cirrus stands for, and what they want Cirrus to stand for also, and what we prioritize within that list of so many different things that we want to be around environment and equity, and oh man, the list goes on. But it's been really just an amazingly gratifying experience to hear more of those voices, and to look forward to how that grows. To Dino's and Chris's point about it never ends, it just, this is a growth project that will go on forever, like far after I'm out of the picture. And that's the best part about all of this.
Yeah, and if I could just add to Wendy's point, because I completely agree. One of the things that we're finding, one of the benefits, like all I'd say functional committees, is there's sort of no hierarchy, and collaboration. It's sort of this idea of collaboration versus expertise. We all acknowledge that we're very early in this process, and so collaboration is much more powerful in this context than resident expertise. And that's where I think the energy comes from, because we're all sort of starting from similar places.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned, Chris, as well as Wendy, is that this idea that you are concentrating on allowing them to be engaged. So even if you're thinking about organizational cultures, there's a buy-in that happens when they're a part of the process, when they're able to say that they have vested stake and vested interest in the success of it, because it's theirs. They have some ownership. And so that most definitely creates a bit of a shift. But I know, in reference to even Dino and Eric, I know we've talked about, right now you're not hiring or anything along those lines, but what are some things that you've been able to do to prepare to create that inclusive workplace culture, even though you're not hiring? Because I know some of the ideas like, well, we just need to bring more diverse people into the culture, but if you're not hiring, what else can you do?
Well, I mean, I go back to just engaging in the conversation. Starting last year, we with our small team, made a decision to be more inclusive or representative in how we were presenting our brand. We are a small brand. We don't do a ton of marketing, but in scouting talent for our photo shoot campaigns, in canvassing the landscape for partner collaborations on the marketing side, I basically said, I want color, I want range. And again, opening, like kind of starting with that, opens the door to all these new sorts of conversations. People are, the people that we've reached out to have been so pleased and so moved by being contacted and by being, engaged and by being given the opportunity. And it's just really nice to see. And, through those connections, you have even deeper conversations about, what was your experience getting involved in this sport? How did you learn to ski or snowboard? what has been your experience of the mountain, you and your friends, it's that kind of, it's education, right? I mean, we are constantly learning and, feeding our brains. And I think this is just, it's like it's like learning a new subject in college, you get to go deep and you get to have a lot of cool conversations, and your mind is just sort of turned on. So, one good thing begets another good thing. And so we've found that with the partner relationships that we've been forming, whether it's on the marketing side or, vendor partnerships, that sort of thing, you find yourself approaching the relationship differently, and with a different point of view. And it's great. It's really refreshing.
Yeah, I think it's been cool because you and I, first of all, we use our strengths. We're very much so information-based individuals. And so we've been able to bounce things off of each other and articles and information. And, I'm always eager when I see Eric pop up on my Instagram. I'm like, ooh, what did Eric send me? And you connected me to Mount Noir, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't know about Mount Noir. So it's like when we are able to create this ecosystem of sharing information,
right.
we get connected and collaborative, and it doesn't seem as daunting as it could be.
Yeah,
for sure.
Not
oh, go ahead, Wendy. Yeah.
Not only so daunting, but the few people have talked about collaboration and meeting new people, and that I think is one of the really powerful things that we've been experiencing is getting better connected to groups within our community, within our snow sports community that have been there for a long time, like National Brotherhood, 1950s. But how connected have we all been? And so by connecting with these activist groups and groups that have been there for so long and just not received the opportunities to be involved more deeply within the industry, I think once we get deeper into that connection between all of us, then the power that we all have moving forward to solve so many other problems that's what's really energizing for me, is what we can do when we all get facing the same direction.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think even what you mentioned as far as like being able to tap into each other's strengths. I know we all have varied strengths, and within the training there was a strength-based approach. I want to talk to you, Dino. How were you able to use your strength to help get yourself on the path? Because I kind of know your strengths. So how have you been able to use them?
I'm a problem solver. No, I think for me, the first step was really identifying, for instance, our hiring practices and how we've done that in the past. It was always about finding the best person for the job, right? And it was a very finite amount of time. And having worked with the group now, we're going to take a different tactic, and that is really taking more time to interview more candidates and really work towards building a diverse team here at Heskra. Not just the best person for the job, but also some diversity within our company. And so that's, one of my goals as we start this project and move forward. But, I will say personally for me, I had a lot of angst in the beginning, even talking about this subject. And now I feel fairly confident in having conversations with my peers, my family members, friends about inclusion and diversity. And, it's kind of interesting because you don't always hear what you want to hear. And it really can shed a different light on relationships and things like that. If there was one hurdle that I've experienced through this process, it's not everybody thinks the same as I do. And that's been insightful. You really have to take that into consideration. So it's, again, been a great process for me personally, and hopefully professionally in the short term here and long term, we're going to see a major shift in how I feel, how I think about inclusion and diversity, and at a company level as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think when we're able to, as we're continuing to engage in the conversation, engage the conversation on inclusion, it really can develop into be a new normal. I think we've talked about this idea of just really creating a daily habit of looking for inclusive moments and finding ways to be more inclusive and expanding your frame of thought. So as we've talked through this process, what has been some of the challenges that, and I know, Dino, you mentioned some of the challenges and the angst. What other challenges have there been as far as like engaging in more of an inclusive behaviors? What have been some challenges that you've had to face? Anyone like to share?
Yeah, again, I think, it's just the perspective that, some of my friends in close circle of friends, what their perspective is, inclusion and diversity, or how little they care about it and how it's not important to them. I want to work to change that and open their eyes to the world we live in. I think, going back to George Floyd and the Black Lives Movement, I was just taken back that in 2020, this is still all happening in our country. I feel like we went backwards 10 years. It was back in the 60s. And that really inspired me to get more education, be a part of this group, and learn more about inclusion. And that's what I would say to anybody that's on the fence. You got to dive in. You got to take the leap of faith, if you will. And I think everybody would be surprised that once you do, people open up and, they may have a difference of opinion, but you're having that conversation and you're beginning to move down that inclusive path.
Oh, yeah. Wendy, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think that's such Dino hits the nail on the head. It's developing this ability within ourselves to really listen to someone else and really be able to understand where their perspective is and where it's coming from, what their experience is, whether it's something that we can identify with or not is another thing, but just developing that ability to really hear what they're saying. And within that, I think you just create this energetic space of the person feeling accepted on some level because they're being listened to. They're not being told they're wrong or they're different or whatever. You're giving them at least the dignity of being heard. And I think that if we can start there and create connections there, it's sort of like with families, we don't always get along. We don't always think the same, but we definitely feel that connection that we have. We're family. And if we can get ourselves to that point, and I'm as guilty as anybody, it's hard for me to really listen openly to somebody without kind of picking, where I see the opportunity for change or, whatever it is, whether I'm right or wrong, it isn't the point. It's me being able to open up and really hear what you're saying. And that's something I'll be working on for a long time, I'm afraid. But yeah, that hits it on the head for me.
Yeah. The word that comes to mind for me, the challenge of this is finding humility, finding humility in others and finding humility in yourself. Part of it is trying to maybe get an opposing point of view to listen to you, but also turning the lens on yourself and being able to listen and understand like where are they coming from? What experiences led them to have the perception that they have now? And how can we meet somewhere? We're all on a spectrum. So how can we kind of let go on both sides and find common ground? But yeah, I think finding humility, internally and externally has been the challenge here.
The metaphor we use with our idea team is that we've communicated to the company is the goal is to set as big a table as possible and that everybody's welcome at it. Because it's clear, whether it's within our company or it's never been more clear in our country lately, that there are a lot of opposing views. And I think the minute that you transition from being, that flirting with the line of being right and being righteous, as soon as you draw a line in the sand and dig your heels in, you've lost the other folks. So it's this idea of that we use is setting as big a table as possible. And also one of the challenges is that I think about, I'm getting more and more comfortable with it, but when we started this journey at our company this summer, it was sort of recognizing that me, what I do for work, I am a 50-something-year-old white heterosexual male of some might say of privilege, and I'm inciting these conversations around equality and inclusion, and it's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable with who I am, but my conviction to creating change, again, whether it's within my family or with our company or within the industry. And so I've struggled personally with the optics of that, despite the fact that I'm deeply committed to playing my part in creating change.
Yeah. You mentioned a good point about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's almost as if you have to really truly ground yourself. And Eric, I love that you talked about this idea of having, in a sense, having humility, but also having empathy and compassion for yourself. Like, we've all been on this journey, we've all made mistakes, we've all had shortcomings, and we're all still here. We're still striving, we're still trying to be better and making better adjustments. And Wendy, I love that you talked about this idea of really expanding interpersonal capacities. I mean, the bigger the table gets, the more interpersonal skills you need, and the more you kind of have to dig deep and challenge yourself in that way. And so as we're talking through this and we're thinking of people that are questioning, like, how do I get on the path? What does that look like? What do you recommend for them to do? Like, what recommendations do you have for those who are still trying to figure it out? And, and even for those who are doing extremely well, but maybe don't want to say too much because they don't want to be shamed or anything of those things along those lines. What recommendations do you have for those?
Call one of us, talk to one of us, reach out to one of us. Obviously, SI is going to be, has been, engaged in this conversation. We'll be continuing to provide more and more resources over time, but, talk to someone, talk to one of us. We're happy to engage in that conversation. And because we, where we are now is quite different from where we started 6 months ago. So it does take some work and some commitment, but it's not, it's not hard. It's not, impossible. It just takes opening the door.
And to Chris's point, I think too, it's each of us have a voice that we can give, and the power of Chris and others who are white, male, heterosexual, of privilege, getting involved. I think getting involved, that's what's making this change seem to be really sustainable and much more effective than it's ever been before, is that the inclusiveness of the voices around this desire for change and this push to action for change is so different than it's been before. And, I've read several things that have reinforced that idea too, that it's no longer just activists, traditional activists in a certain space. It's everybody coming together and going, whoa, there's a lot of things we need to address. And can we all be part of this, no matter how uncomfortable we might feel about it? That heartfelt intention to create change just feels so good. And I think the other, as I was thinking about, what advice, it's like, take this as an adventure. We're in a sport that is all about adventure. And this is an adventure. It's not about being judged or shamed or whatever. It's like, wow, here's an opportunity to learn and move and discover spaces that a lot of us have never been in before. And it can be really gratifying.
Yeah, I think one of the things too is acknowledging that first of all, it's the moral and ethical thing to do to pursue this path, like full stop. But there's an urgency because going down this road is absolutely essential for our industry and for our business. I mean, if you look at the demographic shifts and what the population is going to look like before we get to 2050, it's going to be less than 50% white. It's going to be minorities currently will be in the majority.
Yeah.
And if you juxtapose that with the skiing population, it's largely the same. And over time, over the next few decades, the real casualty in that is going to be the younger skiers. And I think about how a lot of us got started in the sport, skiing with our parents starting early, which is why it's become a lifelong sport. So it's really important that we lean into this a more inclusive, more diverse focus for our business. And the last thing that I would say is, one of the stats that I found really remarkable was that by 2025, 75% of the global workforce is going to be made up of millennials. And millennials, these are going to be the future leaders of our companies, and they really care about this. And if we have a role as leaders to attract and retain the best and brightest, we need to be paying attention to this. So there's the transactional benefit of making sure we're appealing to a more diverse group, but there's an absolute essential component to make sure that we're building our organizations with people of quality and character, and those people really care about this among other topics. So there's a business imperative, not just an ethical imperative.
Yeah. It's almost this idea of when you focus on the qualitative and really expanding beyond your frame of thought, you start to see the benefits. You start seeing that, oh, okay, I can collaborate. I have access to talent that I didn't have prior to before. I have access to perspectives and ideas. And you start to see how expansive things can really be when it comes to your business. And really, I continue to reemphasize this, but inclusion is nothing more than expansion. It's expanding beyond your frame of thought and connecting to others. And as we continue to progress on this, I can't send kudos enough to SIA for their effort and their due diligence. I mean, I recall meeting them a year ago at OR, to be honest, and through Wendy. And, you know, I feel like everyone's became like a second family. Like I feel weird when I don't talk to Maria and Nick. I know that sounds awkward, but I do. And I'm like, where are they? I haven't talked to them because we've been so ingrained with working through this effort, and to see everyone just grow and evolve is really profound. And there's some exciting things that SIA is still doing, you know, I mean, they're still making this, like, this is a part of their business model now, and it's so exciting. And I think, Wendy, you know some of the details as far as like some activities as well as some town halls that are coming up down the pipeline. If you'd be willing to share that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. It's been part of the purpose of the XCon coming together under this inclusion training journey has been to help inform and advise on what SIA can offer to the membership who is asking these questions. You know, what can we do? How do we address creating change within our organizations? So to that end, there is this launch of a series of town halls, which will address different aspects of inclusion and the inclusion journey, and how companies and individuals can best address it on many different aspects, marketing, a variety of different subjects. As well, starting around the 1st of February, there will be an inclusion playbook that will be available on SIA's site to members. And all of this information you can always access through snowsports.org on the inclusion tab. So that's a great resource. But the playbook will really help go through a step-by-step process of where you begin with examining yourself and creating an intention around inclusivity, and then very practical steps for how you can approach this. And as Eric said, yeah, any one of us are always happy to discuss, you know, however we can be supportive of that. We're all in this together, and we want nothing but the best for everybody. And to Chris's point about the business reason to do this, we have struggled for so many years to create stronger participation in our sport, and there are so many people who would love to find ways to be more involved in the sport from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from a participant standpoint. So opening this up in a much more inclusive and welcoming way will be beneficial for us all, psychologically, emotionally, and practically on the business side.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I think what's so cool is that SIA has normalized inclusion. I mean, they've created this platform where you see inclusion on a regular basis. If you go to SIA's website and look under their inclusion tab, I mean, there's a plethora of just tools and resources and information. You know, if you're even interested in going through the SWORD inclusion system, there's a self-guided version as well on the website. We're at session 17. So there's a few more to go because there's 24 sessions. So you can have the replica of what XCOM has experienced. And, you know, what's so great is that this has now become a behavioral shift and everyone's evolved in more inclusive efforts. So it's amazing to see and witness. And, you know, I can most definitely see the future looking mighty bright for the snow sports industry. So as we conclude, I want to thank everyone, Wendy, Eric, Dino, Chris. You know, it's been truly a pleasure to be engaged with you all throughout this process. And I've grown, we've all grown. It's been truly invigorating. And so I invite everyone to partake in the inclusion journey in your own way, whatever works best for you, but it's most definitely worth it. So I'll go ahead and sign off, and I wish everyone an amazing year, 2021 into the new year. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great day.
As we sign off, I'd like to give a quick shout out to, we've been focusing on SIA and what SIA is doing in this, but there have been other portions of the other organizations within the winter outdoors, the PSIA and NSAA, who are participating in this inclusion journey also. And they are just as committed as SIA is to creating this change. So, you know, anybody in the audience who feels more, has closer relationships there, just know that they are part of this journey too, and understanding and working towards this. So that's one of the best parts. It's not just SIA, it's all these organizations that have recognized this, and it gives us all great encouraging feelings about truly creating change.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That's and NSAA as well as Outdoor Industry Association. They've been a part of the training as well. So we've created this bit of an inclusion ecosystem, which is really cool. Thank you so much for adding that on, Wendy. Fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.